Doctor never expected her first day at the Galactic Research Institute to begin with an accusation of fraud. She sat in the sterile white conference room, watching as 12 different alien species whispered among themselves in languages that made her universal translator work overtime. The delegation kept clicking their mandibles in what she'd learned was equivalent to nervous laughter. The crystalline representatives hummed in frequencies that made her teeth ache. "This is preposterous," announced High Researcher, his blue-scaled hands gesturing dramatically at the holographic display floating above the table. The image showed Earth's most recent gravity manipulation demonstration, a simple platform lifting a cargo container. "Your species has existed for what, 200,000 years? We have been studying gravitational forces for 8. This cannot be correct." Adjusted her tablet and tried to keep her voice steady. "The calculations are all here, High Researcher. Our approach differs from yours, but the results speak for themselves." The room erupted into a cacophony of alien sounds. A researcher buzzed angrily while tapping complex equations into the air with 6 arms simultaneously. The gas form flickered between purple and red, their emotional state clearly agitated. Watched the chaos and wondered how humanity had managed to stumble into what appeared to be the galaxy's most sensitive scientific topic. 3 months earlier, she had been a theoretical physicist at MIT, working on her doctoral thesis about gravitational wave interactions. Her research focused on what she called gravitational harmonics, the idea that gravity behaved more like a musical instrument than the simple attractive force most textbooks described. She discovered that by applying specific frequencies to gravitational fields, you could create interference patterns that effectively canceled out gravitational attraction. The discovery had been an accident. Was testing a new sensor array designed to detect minute gravitational variations when her equipment began malfunctioning. Instead of shutting down the experiment, she decided to map the malfunction. What she found changed everything. Her sensor array wasn't malfunctioning. It was creating microscopic anti-gravity pockets by accidentally generating the exact frequency needed to interfere with Earth's gravitational field. Within weeks, her small laboratory demonstration had scaled up to industrial applications. Humanity suddenly possessed working anti-gravity technology, something that had eluded every other species in the known galaxy despite of research. The implications were staggering. Interstellar travel became exponentially cheaper. Construction in space became as simple as building on a planetary surface. Entire industries transformed overnight. The Galactic Research Institute had sent a delegation to Earth within days of humanity's first public demonstration. Still remembered the shock on the alien researchers' faces when they realized what they were witnessing. The delegation leader, a towering named senior researcher, had stammered through 17 different universal translator malfunctions before finally managing to ask a coherent question. Now, sitting in this conference room on Station 442, faced the collective scientific establishment of a galaxy that had supposedly mastered physics thousands of years before humans had invented the wheel. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Perhaps you could explain your methodology again?" asked Doctor, her crystalline form shifting to a more attentive configuration. Unlike the others, the scientist seemed genuinely curious rather than offended. "Our records show that your species only achieved interstellar flight 15 years ago. How did you solve a problem that has challenged our greatest minds for 8,000 years?" Stood and walked to the holographic projector. With a few gestures, she brought up her original research data. The key insight was recognizing that gravity isn't just an attractive force between masses. It's a wave phenomenon that propagates through spacetime at the speed of light. Every massive object in the universe is constantly broadcasting gravitational waves, creating an incredibly complex interference pattern. She highlighted a section of her data showing gravitational wave interactions around Earth. "What we discovered is that by generating artificial gravitational waves at specific frequencies, we could create destructive interference with naturally occurring gravity. It's like noise-canceling headphones, but for gravitational fields." The room fell silent, could almost hear the mental gears turning in 12 different types of alien brains. High Researcher was the first to break the silence. This is elementary wave mechanics," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've known about gravitational waves for 7,000 years. We've detected them, mapped them, used them for communication across galactic distances. How did we never think to interfere with them?" Finished. "In our case, it was partly luck. We approach science differently than you do. Human research tends to be more chaotic. We stumble into discoveries by accident, then figure out the theory afterward. It's not always elegant, but it works. The researcher, Dr. Al, buzzed excitedly. Show us the frequency calculations. If your theory is correct, we should be able to replicate your results immediately. Pulled up the mathematical framework she'd developed. The equations filled the holographic display, complex, but not incomprehensibly so. She watched as the alien scientists absorbed the information, their various forms of body language gradually shifting from skepticism to amazement. The frequency needed to cancel Earth's gravity at sea level is approximately 7.3510 Hz, explained. But here's the crucial part. The required frequency changes based on your distance from other massive objects. You need to constantly adjust the wave generation to maintain stable anti-gravity effects. Doctor's crystalline structure flickered rapidly. Real-time gravitational wave interference, she said, her translated voice carrying a tone of awe. We never considered dynamic frequency adjustment. Our models always assumed static interference patterns. The implications were becoming clear to everyone in the room. For 8,000 years, galactic civilization had possessed all the theoretical knowledge necessary to develop anti-gravity technology. They understood gravitational waves, wave interference, frequency modulation, and advanced materials science. What they had lacked was the insight to combine these concepts in the right way. Continued her presentation, showing how human engineers had developed practical devices. The technology wasn't particularly exotic. Any species with basic wave generation capabilities could build it. The genius lay in the approach, not the implementation. Your gravitational theory is fundamentally correct, said, displaying the standard galactic model of gravity alongside Earth's new understanding. But it's incomplete. You've been treating gravity like a static field when it's actually a dynamic wave system. Once you understand that distinction, anti-gravity becomes straightforward. High researcher leaned back in his chair, his blue scales pale with what had learned was the equivalent of shock. 8,000 years, he repeated. 8,000 years of research, and we missed something this obvious. Not obvious, corrected gently. Different. Human science developed along a different path than yours. We had advantages you didn't have. Such as, asked Dr. Al. Smiled ignorance. The room fell silent again. She could see confusion on the faces that were capable of expressing it. I mean that seriously, continued. When I started my research, I didn't know that anti-gravity was supposed to be impossible. I didn't have 8,000 years of established theory telling me it couldn't be done. Sometimes not knowing the rules makes it easier to break them. The conference continued for several more hours, with walking the assembled scientists through every aspect of human technology. By the end of the session, 3 different species had volunteered to begin immediate replication experiments. They were particularly excited about the possibilities for gas giant mining operations. As the meeting concluded, Doctor approached privately. There is something we must discuss, she said, her crystalline form shifting to what had learned indicated serious concern. Your discovery will change everything in the galaxy, but there are forces that may not welcome such change. What do you mean? The hegemony, Doctor said quietly. They have controlled interstellar transportation for 3,000 years. Their power depends on scarcity, expensive fuel, difficult logistics, limited access to space-based resources. Anti-gravity technology threatens all of that. Felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying they might try to stop us from sharing this technology? I'm saying they will certainly try, Doctor replied. The question is how far they're willing to go. As returned to her temporary quarters on the station, her mind raced with possibilities. She had come here to share a scientific discovery, but it seemed she had stumbled into something much more complex. The galaxy's power structures were built around the assumption that gravity was an immutable force. Now that assumption was crumbling. She pulled up her communication terminal and began composing a message to Earth. Director Sarah at the Global Science Initiative needed to know about the potential political ramifications of their discovery. What had started as a simple physics breakthrough was rapidly becoming a diplomatic crisis. Outside her window, the stars seemed to sparkle with new possibilities. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was probably holding emergency sessions, trying to figure out how to respond to humanity's gift to the galaxy. Hoped they would choose cooperation over confrontation, but Doctor's warning suggested otherwise. The next few days would determine whether humanity's first major contribution to galactic science would be met with gratitude or hostility. Had a sinking feeling it might be the latter. The attack came at 3:47 station time, when most of the research staff was asleep. Woke to the sound of emergency klaxons and the familiar hum of artificial gravity fluctuating. Through her small porthole, she could see the sleek black shapes of hegemony warships surrounding Station 442. She grabbed her emergency kit and rushed toward the laboratory where her gravitational wave generator was stored. The corridors were filled with panicking researchers from a dozen different species, their various forms of distress calls creating a symphony of fear. The station's defense systems were already engaging the attackers, blue energy beams lancing out toward the hegemony vessels. Doctor's voice cut through the chaos. The crystalline scientist appeared beside, her form flickering rapidly between colors. "They're jamming all communications to Earth. We have to protect your research data." His heart sank. How long before they board the station? Minutes, maybe less. The hegemony doesn't waste time on negotiations. They reached the laboratory just as another explosion rocked the station. Its equipment was still intact, but she could see hegemony boarding pods attaching to the station's hull through the lab windows. She quickly began downloading her research files onto portable storage devices. "Why are they doing this?" asked as she worked. "The technology could benefit everyone in the galaxy." "That's exactly why they're afraid," Doctor replied, helping to gather the physical components of gravitational wave generator. "The hegemony's entire power structure depends on controlling interstellar transportation. They own the fastest ships, the most efficient engines, the most reliable navigation systems. Anti-gravity technology makes all of that obsolete overnight." The sound of cutting tools echoed through the station's hull. The hegemony forces were almost through. Finished the download and pocketed the storage device. "There has to be another way, some form of compromise." "You don't understand the hegemony," said a new voice. Turned to see Dr. Al, the researcher, entering the lab with several other scientists. 3,000 years ago, they were just another merchant species. They built their empire by controlling trade routes and transportation technology. They've crushed dozens of innovations that threatened their monopoly. "But this is different," protested. "This isn't just about transportation. Anti-gravity has applications in medicine, construction, energy generation, planetary engineering." "Which makes it even more dangerous to them," Dr. Al buzzed grimly. "A technology this revolutionary doesn't just disrupt one industry, it transforms entire civilizations." The sound of cutting tools stopped. Heard the unmistakable whine of energy weapons charging. The hegemony forces were inside the station. "Is there another way out of here?" she asked. Doctor pointed toward a maintenance access panel. "The ventilation system connects to the docking bay, if we can reach my ship." Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Grabbed the most critical components of her equipment and followed the alien scientists into the narrow maintenance tunnel. Behind them, she could hear hegemony troops entering the laboratory. The tunnel was barely large enough for human-sized beings, which meant the Dr. Al had to compress himself uncomfortably to fit. They crawled through the cramped space for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. His knees were raw from sliding across the metal grating, and her shoulders ached from carrying the equipment. "Hold on," Doctor whispered from ahead. "I'm detecting movement in the docking bay." Heard muffled voices speaking in the harsh, guttural language of the hegemony. Her universal translator was picking up fragments. "Destroy all research materials and capture the human alive." "They want me alive," whispered. "Of course," Dr. Al replied quietly. "You're the only one who fully understands the practical applications of your discovery. They'll try to force you to work exclusively for them." The idea of her discovery being used to strengthen the very forces that wanted to suppress it made stomach turn. She thought about all the potential benefits of anti-gravity technology, space elevators that could lift entire populations off dying worlds, medical devices that could manipulate gravity to assist with surgery, construction projects that could build habitats in previously impossible locations. The hegemony would lock all of that away to protect their transportation monopoly. Doctor held up one crystalline appendage, signaling for silence. After a moment, she whispered, "The docking bay is mostly clear. 2 guards at the entrance, but they're facing outward. We might be able to reach my ship." checked her portable storage device one more time. All her research was there, the theoretical framework, the practical applications, the engineering specifications. Even if the hegemony captured her, the knowledge could still be shared with other species. They emerged from the maintenance tunnel behind a stack of cargo containers. Doctor's ship was a sleek research vessel, its crystalline hull designed to resonate with gravitational waves for enhanced detection capabilities. Realized with growing excitement that the ship's existing sensors could be easily modified to generate the interference patterns needed for anti-gravity propulsion. "Can your ship's gravitational sensors be repurposed?" whispered urgently. Doctor's form shifted to a curious blue-green pattern. "Theoretically, yes, but the power requirements would be enormous." "Not if we use resonance amplification," replied, her mind racing. "Your ship's hull is already designed to interact with gravitational waves. With a few modifications to the sensor array, we could create a feedback loop that amplifies the interference effect by several orders of magnitude." Dr. Al's antennae twitched excitedly. "You're talking about turning the entire ship into a gravitational wave generator." "Exactly. Instead of canceling gravity locally, we'd be creating a bubble of altered spacetime around the ship. It would be incredibly fast and virtually undetectable by conventional sensors." The hegemony guards were still focused on the main entrance to the docking bay, and the alien scientists crept carefully between cargo containers toward Doctor's ship. They were halfway there when one of the guards turned around. The guard, a heavily armored with cybernetic implants covering half his face, shouted an alarm in his native language. Energy blasts immediately began striking the cargo containers around them, sending sparks and debris flying. "Run," Doctor called out, her ship's boarding ramp already extending. Sprinted toward the vessel, clutching her equipment and storage device. Behind her, she could hear more hegemony troops responding to the alarm. Energy beams whistled past her head as she dove up the boarding ramp just as it began to retract. Doctor was already at the pilot's station, her crystalline form interfacing directly with the ship's controls. "Initiating emergency departure," she announced. "Everyone secure yourselves." The ship lifted off just as hegemony forces flooded into the docking bay, watched through the rear viewport as armored figures fired futilely at their departing vessel. The research station fell away below them, its hull from the attack. "Where are we going?" asked. "The neutral zone," Doctor replied. "It's the only place the hegemony can't legally pursue us, but we need to modify my ship's systems before they catch us." Was already examining the ship's gravitational sensor array. The technology was elegant in its simplicity, crystalline structures that resonated with gravitational fields, amplifying and focusing the signals for analysis. With some reconfiguration, these same structures could generate the interference patterns needed for anti-gravity propulsion. "I need access to your ship's power coupling systems," said, pulling up technical schematics on her tablet. Dr. Al buzzed excitedly as he reviewed proposed modifications. "This is brilliant. The resonance cascade effect should increase our available power by a factor of 50. We'll be able to generate interference patterns strong enough to affect gravitational fields across several cubic kilometers." For the next 2 hours, worked feverishly to reprogram Doctor's ship. The alien scientists helped where they could, but much of the work required an intuitive understanding of gravitational wave interactions that only possessed. She found herself explaining concepts she had never fully articulated before, walking her colleagues through the logical steps that had led to her discovery. "The key insight," she explained while rerouting power conduits, "is that gravity isn't separate from the other fundamental forces. It's all part of the same unified field that underlies spacetime itself. When you understand that connection, manipulating gravity becomes as straightforward as manipulating electromagnetic fields." Doctor's ship shuddered as pursuing hegemony vessels opened fire. Their shots fell short, but knew it was only a matter of time before the faster military ships caught up. "Modifications complete," announced, her hands flying over the makeshift control interface she had constructed. "Initializing gravitational wave generation in 3, 2, 1. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. Felt her stomach lurch as the ship's local gravitational field fluctuated, then stabilized at a new equilibrium. Outside the viewports, the stars seemed to shift and dance as spacetime itself bent around their vessel. Doctor's crystalline form flickered rapidly between dozens of colors. Incredible! We're not just moving through space, we're riding the gravitational waves themselves. The pursuing hegemony ships suddenly seemed to be moving in slow motion. Watched in amazement as her modified anti-gravity system propelled them forward at speeds that should have been impossible. They weren't just negating gravity. They were using it as a propulsion system, surfing the gravitational waves generated by nearby stars and planets. This changes everything, Dr. Al buzzed in amazement. Transportation, communication, energy generation, every aspect of galactic civilization will be transformed. Nodded, but her expression remained serious. That's exactly what the hegemony is afraid of. They won't stop trying to control this technology. We need to make sure it gets shared with everyone, not just the species that can afford it. As they entered the safety of the neutral zone, began composing a detailed technical manual. She would broadcast it on every possible communication channel, ensuring that every species in the galaxy had access to the knowledge. The hegemony might be able to suppress individual researchers, but they couldn't silence an entire galaxy. The revolution had begun, and intended to make sure it spread to every corner of known space. 6 months later, stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the most remarkable sight she had ever witnessed. Hundreds of ships filled the space around the neutral zone's capital, but these weren't the sleek, expensive vessels that had dominated galactic transportation for. These were crude, improvised craft built by dozens of different species, using freely distributed anti-gravity technology. A massive mining ship, its hull cobbled together from asteroid ore and held together by gravity-dampening fields, drifted past a delicate Etherian exploration vessel that looked more like a soap bubble than a spacecraft. Nearby, a group of young had somehow converted a cargo container into a functional anti-gravity racer, complete with racing stripes painted in bioluminescent algae. "It's beautiful chaos," said Director Sarah, joining at the observation window. The head of Earth's Global Science Initiative had arrived the previous day aboard humanity's diplomatic vessel, itself a testament to how quickly technology had advanced. Smiled as she watched an educational ship teaching crystalline younglings how to manipulate gravitational fields with nothing more than modified communication equipment. This is what science should be, accessible to everyone, not locked away in corporate laboratories or military installations. The transformation had been rapid and overwhelming. Within weeks of technical manual being broadcast across the galaxy, every major species had working anti-gravity prototypes. The simpler designs could be built with materials available to any technologically capable civilization, while the more advanced applications were spurring innovations that herself hadn't imagined. They had developed gravitational medical treatments that could manipulate cellular structures at the quantum level, effectively curing genetic diseases that had plagued their gas-form biology for thousands of years. They were using precise gravity control in their hive construction projects, building structures that would have been impossible under normal gravitational conditions. Even the crystalline had found ways to grow their city organisms in three-dimensional patterns that conventional architecture. "The hegemony isn't giving up," Director warned. "Our intelligence suggests they're planning something more dramatic than their attack on the research station." Turned away from the window, "What kind of something?" "We're not sure yet. They've been recruiting mercenaries from the Outer Rim, including some species that aren't bound by Galactic Council treaties. There are rumors about weapons that can disrupt gravitational fields on a planetary scale." The idea sent a chill down spine. The same principles that allowed for beneficial gravity manipulation could theoretically be weaponized. A sufficiently powerful gravitational wave generator could destabilize a planet's orbit, collapse artificial gravity systems, or even create localized black holes. "Have they actually built anything like that?" asked. "Not that we know of, but the theoretical framework exists. Your research opened doors in both directions." I've been wrestling with this moral dilemma for months. Every revolutionary technology carried the potential for both creation and destruction. The same nuclear physics that powered clean fusion reactors could also level cities. The same genetic engineering that cured diseases could also create biological weapons. Now her gravitational wave technology was following the same pattern. "Director, I need to ask you something," said carefully. How much does Earth's government actually understand about the long-term implications of this technology? Director raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean that anti-gravity is just the beginning. Once you understand how to manipulate gravitational fields, you can affect the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. We're not just talking about faster transportation or better construction techniques. We're talking about technology that could potentially manipulate time, create stable wormholes, or even access parallel dimensions. The director's face went pale. Are you saying you've been holding back information? I'm saying I've been trying to understand the implications before sharing everything I've discovered. Some of this knowledge could be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Before Director could respond, an urgent chime echoed through the station's communication system. Recognized the pattern priority alert from the Galactic Council. They rushed to the nearest communication terminal, where a holographic image of Counselor materialized. The tall, usually composed demeanor was replaced by obvious distress. Director, we have an emergency situation. The hegemony has seized control of the industrial world 186b. They're using some form of gravitational weapon to hold the planet hostage. Worst fears were becoming reality. What kind of weapon? Our long-range sensors detect massive gravitational wave emissions from the planet's surface. The local population reports that artificial gravity has failed across the entire world. Millions of beings are trapped in their cities, unable to function in the planet's natural 1.8G environment. Director stepped forward. What are the hegemony's demands? Complete cessation of anti-gravity research and development by all species, destruction of all existing technology, and, Counselor paused. They want Doctor delivered to them within 72 hours, or they'll use their weapon to destabilize 186b's orbit. Felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her discovery, meant to benefit all sentient life, was now being used to threaten an entire world. Counselor, I need technical specifications on their weapon, said, her mind already working through possibilities. Power output, frequency range, wave generation methods, anything you can get. Doctor, you can't seriously be considering surrendering to them, Director protested. I'm not, replied firmly, but I might be able to stop their weapon. The same principles that create gravitational interference can also be used to cancel it out. We just need to understand exactly what they're doing. Over the next several hours, intelligence flowed in from across the galaxy. The hegemony had indeed weaponized gravitational wave technology, but their implementation was crude and inefficient. They were using massive power stations to generate chaotic gravitational interference, essentially creating a gravitational static field that disrupted all other gravity-based technology in the area. Studied the data with Doctor and several other scientists who had gathered at New Geneva Station. The solution was theoretically simple but practically challenging. We need to generate a counter-interference pattern, explained to the assembled group. Think of it like noise-canceling headphones again. The hegemony is broadcasting gravitational static. We need to broadcast the exact opposite pattern to cancel it out. Dr. Al buzzed thoughtfully. The power requirements would be enormous. A single ship couldn't generate enough interference to counter their weapon. No, but a fleet could, replied. If we coordinate multiple gravity generators, we can create a distributed interference network. Each ship contributes part of the overall pattern. Doctor's crystalline form shifted to an excited golden hue. A gravitational orchestra, each vessel playing a different note in a complex harmony designed to neutralize their weapon. The plan came together with surprising speed. Species across the galaxy volunteered ships and crews for the mission. Even former hegemony client species offered to help, apparently deciding that their long-term interests lay with technological freedom rather than continued monopolistic control. Found herself coordinating a fleet of over 300 vessels, each equipped with hastily modified gravitational wave generators. The diversity was staggering: sleek Etherian scout ships, massive industrial haulers, agile military vessels, and even a few experimental human craft that pushed the boundaries of technology. The journey to 186b took 18 hours at maximum speed. Spent the time fine-tuning the interference calculations, ensuring that each ship in the fleet would generate precisely the right frequency at precisely the right moment. The margin for error was virtually zero. A miscalculation could destabilize the planet's gravity permanently. As they approached the system, long-range sensors revealed the full scope of the hegemony's operation. A massive space station orbited 186b, its hull bristling with gravitational wave generators. The planet below was dark except for emergency lighting. Most technology had failed when artificial gravity systems collapsed. Hegemony fleet detected, reported the tactical officer aboard's command ship. 47 vessels in defensive formation around their weapon station. Studied the tactical display. The Hegemony had positioned their ships to protect their weapon, but they hadn't anticipated an attack using gravitational interference. Their defensive systems were designed to stop conventional weapons, not coordinated wave manipulation. "All ships, this is," she announced over the fleet communication channel. "Remember, we're not here to fight a battle. We're here to solve a physics problem. Execute interference pattern Alpha in 3, 2, 1, mark." The effect was immediate and spectacular. 300 ships simultaneously began generating precisely calibrated gravitational waves, their combined output creating an interference pattern that propagated across the entire system at the speed of light. Watched her instruments as the chaotic gravitational static around 186b began to stabilize. On the planet's surface, emergency broadcasts reported that artificial gravity systems were coming back online. Cities that had been trapped in darkness for days suddenly blazed with light as their power grids reconnected. The Hegemony fleet tried to respond, but their conventional weapons were useless against a distributed gravitational attack. Watched with satisfaction as their weapon station's power output fluctuated wildly, then collapsed entirely. Without their gravitational weapon, the Hegemony forces were just another military fleet facing an enemy they couldn't effectively target. "This is Hegemony, Commander," came a transmission from the enemy flagship. "Cease your attack immediately, or we will open fire on civilian targets." Keyed her communication system. "Commander, this isn't an attack. It's a demonstration. Your weapon has been neutralized, and your monopoly on interstellar technology is over. You can either accept that reality peacefully, or you can watch your empire crumble as every species in the galaxy develops their own technology." The Hegemony fleet held position for several tense minutes. Could imagine the desperate conferences taking place aboard their command ships as they realized their situation. They faced not just a superior force, but a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. Finally, Commander's voice crackled over the communication channel again. "We request permission to withdraw from system space." "Granted," replied. "But Commander, this technology belongs to everyone now. The age of artificial scarcity is over." As the Hegemony fleet departed, allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The crisis had been resolved, but more importantly, it had demonstrated something crucial about the future of galactic civilization. When species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources, they could overcome any challenge. The rescue fleet remained in orbit around 186b for several days, helping to repair damaged gravity systems and ensuring that the planet's infrastructure was fully restored. Found herself working alongside engineers and scientists from dozens of different species, all united in the common goal of making the technology work better. On the final day, as prepared to return to New Geneva Station, she received an unexpected visitor. Doctor, the researcher who had initially accused her of fraud, appeared at her ship's airlock with a delegation of Galactic Institute scientists. "Doctor," he said, his blue scales showing embarrassment coloration, "I owe you an apology. When you first presented your research, I was so focused on protecting 8,000 years of established theory that I couldn't see the revolutionary potential of your work." Smiled. "No apology necessary, Doctor. Scientific skepticism is healthy. Without it, we'd never test our assumptions or push the boundaries of knowledge." "There is something else," the continued. "The Galactic Institute wishes to offer you the position of Chief Director of Gravitational Research. The salary and resources would be unlimited." Considered the offer for a moment, then shook her head. "Thank you, but no. I think my work is better served outside institutional boundaries. Science belongs to everyone, not just to those who can afford expensive research positions." Instead, spent the return journey to New Geneva Station working on her next project. a comprehensive educational program that would teach gravitational physics to students across the galaxy. She envisioned schools where young beings from every species could learn to manipulate gravity as easily as they learned to read and write. The galaxy had spent 8,000 years studying gravity and still misunderstood it, was determined to make sure that future generations would have all the tools they needed to understand the universe around them. After all, the greatest discoveries were yet to come, and they would emerge from minds that weren't constrained by the limitations of the past. As her ship engaged its drive for the journey home, looked out at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, a young alien student was probably already working on the next breakthrough that would change everything again. That was exactly how science was supposed to work.